In lesson 1.47, and we're starting, as you see right here inside the lesson today, I'd like to talk to you about two issues before you go ahead and do the lesson yourself, perform the activities in the lesson independently. The first is the whole issue of the first two sections of each of the lessons in this series of lessons, which deal with reviewing the singular conjugations of all 60 of the common verbs that you've learned, and learning the plural conjugations of all 60 verbs that you've learned thus far. It's critical that you actually are going ahead and performing both the activities in the first two sections of these lessons, because I realize it's very easy to gloss over them and pass directly to the sentences which you must form and on which you'll be tested. The first section tells you simply to listen, as you can see by the instruction at the top of this page, to the conjugations. Go ahead and listen to repeatedly to the most difficult conjugations, the ones which are more predictable. For example, let's take oublier. Oublier, the second one you see on the screen right here. The oublier, you simply j'oublie, tu oublies, il oublie. You're going to chop off the e ending, and then nous oublions, and vous oubliez, and then il and elles oublient. That's all very, very predictable. However, there occasionally you'll come upon irregular verbs in these lessons. And in this particular lesson, there are no irregular verbs, but there is the verb se lever, a reflexive verb. Se, which has the concept of doing an action to oneself, and then the action itself, lever, lever, se lever, which means to get oneself up. And the se, you may remember, is going to change to me, te, ce, or nous, and then ce at the end with il and elle plural as the pronoun that precedes the verb. So you will say je me lève, tu te lèves. Tu is like this. Il, elle se lève, and then nous levons, and vous levez. And il and elle se lève are the conjugations. But if you don't remember about how to conjugate a reflexive verb like se lever, or you learned earlier on se laver, when you're talking about washing yourself, or je me lave les mains, if you don't remember how, that's why this section exists. When you come upon a verb which is a little difficult, you don't remember all of its forms, or you realize it's going to take a little extra concentration to remember them, that's when you listen repeatedly to this line of pronouns. You listen to je me lève, tu te lèves, il se lève, elle se lève, vous vous levez, nous nous levons, vous vous levez, il se lève, elle se lève. That's what this first section is for. So don't cut corners. When you come upon a difficult verb, listen to it repeatedly. And then the second section, which you see down below here, second section where you see the mouth indicating that you are to say the conjugation before you listen, go ahead and actually do so. If you want to skip past, I suppose, the verbs which are regular, maybe only do one form of them. For example, oublier, just do the je form, j'oublie. If you're confident that you will remember that it's tu oublies, il oublie, elle oublie, nous oublions, vous oubliez, ils oublient, elles oublient. If you're confident that you'll remember those because they simply follow the regular pattern that you've drilled into your mind by this point, skip them. Just do one form, like the je form, and click and make sure you're on the right track. So when you get down to courir in this section, and you chop off the ending, you should say je cours, not je couris, for example. Click and make sure that je cours is correct. But for the difficult, challenging verbs, those are the ones you listen to repeatedly, that whole string of them, je me lève, tu te lèves, il se lève, to get that pattern ingrained in your mind. Okay? So that's the first point, is don't cut corners. Go ahead and do the activities requested of you in the first two sections of these lessons, in this series of lessons focusing on verb conjugation. Because, as I said in the last video, form matters. The most important thing is communication, is getting your ideas across. If you can get your ideas across and you're not requiring the French person to use your native language, to use English, that's already laudable. That's praiseworthy. Good job. However, if you really want to make an impact and you want to be taken seriously, go that extra step and perfect your speech. Learn how to conjugate verbs correctly so that people have greater esteem for you and for the things that you have to say. The second point, I realize that this series of lessons, is somewhat tedious, as I've already mentioned in the last video. and that it's going to be tough to get yourself to keep your nose to the grindstone, as they say, and to keep reviewing these verb conjugations, even though it must be done. But I said I'm not unrealistic, and so again I've inserted a game into this particular lesson. And the game is found at the end of lesson 1.47, and it's called, creatively enough, the tug of war game, because it's a tug of war, as you'll see in just a moment, at least a figurative tug of war. So let me show you first of all where you can find a detailed explanation, or at least where your teacher, if you have a classroom teacher, can find a detailed explanation of how this game is to be played. And then afterward, I'll show you the game itself, and you'll get a general idea for how it is to be performed, even if you don't have a classroom teacher to guide you through it. So first of all, for the sake of the classroom teacher, this is where the explanation is found as to how to play the tug-of-war game. Let's go to the home page. Then we'll click on Daily Lessons. And this particular, we'll choose French, of course. And this particular game is found for the first time in class 67. So we'll click on 67. And that takes us to a screen in which, of course, at the top there's an explanation for those independent students who don't have a classroom teacher to guide them. But then more detailed explanations are found down below here of the activities to do in each class. By clicking on here, your classroom teacher finds a lesson plan. It opens a lesson plan. And within that lesson plan, the very last point, if you look down here at the bottom, says play the tug-of-war game found in section 4 of lesson 1.47. By clicking here on this link, this takes your classroom teacher to the detailed explanation as to how the tug-of-war game is played. Okay. Now, for the sake of everyone else, the student, and especially an independent study student, let me show you how this game could be played, even if you don't have access to the teacher's lesson plans. I should point out, however, that the game really makes no sense unless there are at least two of you. So if you're an independent study student, a homeschooled student, you need to have someone else to compete with. Otherwise, it's not real meaningful. I suppose you could try and trick yourself into intentionally making mistakes and let your other self challenge you, but probably that's not going to hold your attention, and you won't be able to fool yourself for very long. So we go to Unit 1 and Lesson 47. And at the end of Lesson 47, Section 4 will come to a mouse. And as you know, the mouse indicates that you're to click on it because something exciting is about to happen. And that thing that is exciting is the tug-of-war game, which is found in the form of a PowerPoint presentation, as you see here. A stirring drum roll is to raise your competitive juices. And here we go. We see a mouse, and once again we know that mice are to be clicked on, of course. We click on the mouse, and here you see, oh, I should go back to the previous screen because it's too late. The previous screen showed some men just standing in a relaxed stance before the tug of war was to take place. Now you see they're ready to go. They're holding the rope and they're ready to start yanking. And here's the first screen. One of the two teams, your class should be divided into two teams, is going to go first. And let's assume that the team that's going to go first is the blue team. Those will be the people on the right-hand side as the teacher's looking at the class. And what their job is to do is to say the vocabulary word corresponding to this picture. And so they say, la musique rock. And the teacher, recognizing that they said it, of course, is going to click on the right arrow key on the keyboard to move to the next screen. Now, you may not have noticed, but at the very bottom, you see this red flag here. If you've played a tug of war before, you know there's always a little flag tied on the middle of the rope, and there are two lines past which the two teams have to try and pull that rope to beat the other team. Well, you may have noticed this rope moved imperceptibly to the right. Keep watching that rope, or that flag, and you'll see that happening more and more. So the blue team, by the way, you have 5 seconds in which to say the correct answer. So the blue team said the correct answer. They come to this screen, and the next person on their team has to say either l'anglais or les États-Unis. I suppose both answers would be acceptable. And so the teacher hits the right arrow key again, and notice how the flag moved again. And the team says le baseball, and then les toilettes, and then le pupitre. And then they come to this screen right here. Notice how the flag is moving to the right. The poor green guys being dragged on their heels across the floor. And And however, at this point, the blue team, their next member says, le vélo. And at that point, the teacher says, non, c'est pas le vélo. It's not the vélo, hein? It's a bicycle. At that point, the turn goes to the green team. And they must try to say the correct word corresponding to this green. And the first member of the green team says, la moto. And the teacher recognizes the accuracy and therefore hits the left arrow key on the keyboard. And notice how the flag starts moving back. Le pupitre, and the next person says. And the next says, les toilettes, le baseball, les États-Unis, la musique rock, la musique classique. Well, it was in 5 seconds. I had 5 seconds. Le camion, la radio, le livre. The green team's out of control. They're cleaning up here. La pizza, le feutre, etc., etc. And so let's say the green team, after numerous turns, has finally got the flag right to this point. 70 screens later, by the way. To this point right here. And they say, la camionnette, la poubelle, le podium. And at that point, wild applause breaks out. And the game is over. So that is how you play the tug-of-war game. You may now, at this point, go into lesson 1.47 and perform the activities found there. And I'll see you in the course of our next class. Au revoir.